By morning the rain was gone, but the truth stayed. Sunlight pushed through the thin kitchen curtains. Landing on the table where the letter still lay, folded and quiet, like it had more to say. Emily Carter stood by the sink, staring at the street outside, feeling older than she had the night before. Some nights don't end when the sun comes up. They follow you into the day and ask you to see everything differently. David Miller sat across from her, nursing a cup of coffee he barely drank. The house felt awake in a new way, as if it had finally been allowed to breathe. The silence between them was not tense anymore. It was thoughtful. Emily picked up the letter and slid it into the envelope. She didn't feel angry now. She felt curious. "Tell me about him," she said. David looked surprised, then relieved. He nodded slowly. His name was Thomas Reed. He and your mother were young. College age. Big dreams. No money. Emily smiled faintly. That sounds like her. She believed love could fix anything back then, David said. She learned later that love needs timing too. David spoke carefully, choosing words that respected a woman who was no longer there to explain herself. He told Emily how her mother had met Thomas during a summer job in Maine. How they had planned a future filled with hope and vague promises. But life had pulled them in different directions. Thomas wanted to chase opportunity across the country. Her mother wanted roots, family, stability. She chose the life that let her breathe, David said. Emily listened, her emotions shifting with each sentence. The story felt familiar in a way she couldn't explain, like a mirror she hadn't known existed. "And you?" Emily asked. "When did you come into the picture?" Years later, David said. She was more guarded then, stronger. She didn't rush love anymore. Emily nodded. That sounded right too. "Did she ever talk about him after you married?" Emily asked. "Only once," David replied. "She said some loves stay quiet inside us. Not because they are stronger, but because they belong to a different version of ourselves." Emily felt her throat tighten. She realized her mother hadn't hidden the truth to deceive. She had done it to protect the present from the weight of the past. Later that afternoon, Emily drove to the lake where she used to go as a teenager to think. The water was calm, reflecting the pale sky. She sat on a bench and called Michael. He answered on the second ring. "I was starting to think you disappeared," he said, half joking. "I almost did," Emily replied honestly. She told him everything, not the details of the letter, but the lesson it had taught her. About choices. About fear. About love that waits too long and fades into regret. "I don't want that," she said. "I don't want to look back and wonder." There was a pause on the line. Then Michael said, "I'm here." Those words felt heavier than any promise. When Emily returned to the house that evening, David was in the garage sorting through old boxes. She joined him, helping without being asked. They worked in quiet rhythm, tossing out broken things, setting aside memories worth keeping. "I used to think families were built on big moments," Emily said suddenly. "Weddings, birthdays, holidays." David smiled. "They're built on ordinary days too. And on honesty, even when it's uncomfortable." Emily stopped and looked at him. "Thank you for telling me the truth." David nodded. "Thank you for listening." As the sun set, Emily packed the last box. The house no longer felt heavy. It felt complete. Before leaving, Emily placed the letter back into the piano bench, this time with intention. It belonged there, not hidden, but resting. That night, in her apartment miles away, Emily lay awake thinking about how love changes shape over time. How it doesn't always end, but it evolves. How choosing someone doesn't erase the paths not taken. She thought of her mother, young and hopeful. She thought of David, steady and patient. She thought of herself, standing at the edge of a choice. The next morning, Emily met Michael for coffee. This time, she didn't keep her guard up. She spoke openly, laughed freely, listened closely. She let herself be present. Somewhere between the second cup and the shared silence, Emily understood something simple and powerful. Love is not ruined by the truth. It is strengthened by it. Weeks later, Emily returned to the house one last time to hand the keys to the new owners. She walked through each room slowly, not to say goodbye, but to say thank you. At the piano, she paused. The bench was closed. The secret inside it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a lesson passed down, not in words, but in courage. Emily stepped outside, locked the door, and handed over the keys. The house behind her held many stories, but the one that mattered most was still being written. The rain started before Emily Carter realized how late it was, sharp and sudden. Drumming against the quiet Vermont street like a warning she didn't understand yet. Inside the house, a single lamp burned in the living room, throwing long shadows across old furniture that still smelled faintly of lemon polish and memories. Emily stood in the center of it all, holding a letter that was never meant to be in her hands. The moment she unfolded it, her life shifted, even before she read the first line. She had come to the house only to pack a few boxes. That was the plan. Quick, clean, emotional, but manageable. The house had been empty since her mother's death 6 months earlier, and Emily had avoided it as long as she could. But time runs out on avoidance. Bills needed closing. Rooms needed clearing. Goodbyes needed saying, even when no one is there to hear them. The piano bench was an afterthought. It sat under the old upright piano, scratched and ignored just like it had been for years. Emily lifted the lid, expecting dust and maybe old sheet music. Instead, she found an envelope, yellowed and thin, tucked under a folded scarf. Her mother's scarf. The sight of it tightened Emily's chest before she even touched the letter. The handwriting stopped her cold. It was her mother's, careful, slanted, familiar. The letter was not sealed. It never had been. Emily hesitated only once before opening it. She told herself she was not invading anything. She told herself this house was hers now. These things were hers now. But deep down she felt the quiet wrongness of it, like stepping onto ice that might crack. "My first love," the letter began. Emily's breath caught. She read fast, her eyes moving quicker than her thoughts. The words spoke of youth, of a summer long ago, of dreams built on hope instead of plans. The tone was soft, not dramatic, but heavy with emotion. Her mother wrote about choices, about leaving someone she loved because life demanded something else. She wrote about wondering, even years later, what might have been. Emily's hands shook. This was not the story she had grown up with. Her parents' love had always seemed steady, ordinary, safe. Her mother and David, her stepfather, met when Emily was 10. They married when she was 12. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was solid. Or so she thought. The letter ended without regret, but not without longing. Emily pressed the paper to her chest, her heart pounding. Questions rushed in all at once. Who was this man? Did David know? Why keep this hidden? And the sharpest question of all, how much of her life was built on silence? That was when the door opened. The sound was soft, almost polite, but it sliced through the room. Emily spun around. David stood in the doorway, frozen, his hands still on the knob. Rain clung to his jacket. His hair was damp. His face, usually calm and predictable, looked stripped of its armor. For a moment, neither of them moved. Emily felt like she had been caught doing something wrong, even though she didn't know why. Her fingers tightened around the letter. David's eyes dropped to the paper in her hand. "You found it," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired. That frightened her more. "I wasn't looking for it," Emily said quickly, the words tumbling out. It was just there. "I know," he replied. The silence that followed pressed in on them. The house seemed too small for the truth now, hanging in the air. "You knew about this?" Emily asked. David stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The sound echoed louder than it should have. "Yes," he said. "I knew." Emily stared at him. This man had helped her with homework, taught her how to drive, walked her down the aisle. He had always been steady, always present. And now, in a single moment, he felt like a stranger. "How long?" she asked. "All along." The words landed hard. Emily shook her head. "Why didn't she tell me?" David took off his coat slowly, like time had suddenly stretched. He hung it on the back of a chair before finally sitting across from her. His movements were careful, controlled, as if one wrong move might break something fragile between them. "Because she wanted to protect you," he said. "From what?" Emily snapped, her voice sharper than she intended. "From confusion," David replied gently. "From doubt. From the idea that love is simple when it never is." Emily laughed once, short and bitter. "You think this protected me?" David didn't answer right away. He rubbed his hands together, a habit Emily recognized from moments when he was nervous or deep in thought. "Your mother loved deeply," he said. "That was her strength. And sometimes her burden." Emily looked down at the letter again. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. "Did she love you?" Emily asked. David met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes, then why write this?" "Because loving someone once doesn't mean you erase them," he said. "It means you learn how to live with the memory." Emily stood up abruptly and paced the room. The walls seemed closer now, filled with echoes she had never noticed before. "So you just lived with this?" she asked. "I chose to," David said. "Just like she chose me." The rain outside grew heavier, pounding against the roof. Emily stopped near the window, staring out into the dark street. "You were okay with it?" she asked. "I was honest with myself," he replied. "That's not the same thing as easy." Emily turned back to him. "Did you ever wonder if she wished she'd chosen differently?" David's expression softened. "I wondered if she was human." That answer stopped her. Emily felt something shift inside her, not peace. Not understanding, but space. Space for complexity. Space for truth that wasn't neat. She thought of her own life, of the relationships she had walked away from because timing was wrong or fear was louder than hope. She thought of Michael, whose calls she had ignored lately, whose patience she had taken for granted. The letter in her hand suddenly felt less like a betrayal and more like a confession to the future. "I don't know how to feel," Emily said quietly. "You don't have to know tonight," David replied. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and deep. Emily folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table between them. "I loved her," Emily said, "but I didn't know her like this." David nodded. "None of us ever know the full story of the people we love." They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Not heavy, just honest. Outside, the rain began to slow. Emily realized that the night she had feared, the night everything would fall apart, had not destroyed her family's story. It had opened it. And she sensed deep in her chest that this was only the beginning.